The immediate threat of Wagner's insurrection might be over, but the lasting damage to Putin's power remains to be seen. The fissures inside Russian ranks demonstrate Putin's political and military vulnerabilities. Putin's predicament is bound to dominate discussion at the upcoming NATO summit next month in Lithuania. Right now, NATO's official line is, "We are monitoring the situation." But the Lithuanian president tweeted, quote, "The Kremlin regime reaps what it sows. All the violence directed at Ukraine has backfired." Latvia and Estonia, two NATO countries that border Russia, say they are further increasing security. Joining me now, former Democratic Congresswoman Jane Harman of California. She was ranking member of the House Intelligence Committee for 4 years during her time on the Hill and now co-chairs the Commission on the National Defense Strategy. Congresswoman Harman, thank you very much for coming back to the show this morning. This is a serious blow to the stability of the Russian regime. Where does Putin's grip on power stand now versus just a few days ago?
Well, it's weaker now than a few days ago. What it will look like in another press cycle is unknown. And I think this ain't over, as Yogi used to say, it ain't over till it's over. And this deal that was cut and the cessation of this insurrection so quickly just makes no sense to me. So I think we all have to be vigilant. Those outside of Russia should not be talking about regime change. That's up to the Russian people. I think Ukraine has to be incredibly vigilant because I think there's some low-hanging fruit. I hate to put it that way, but I think the Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant was already encircled by Russians who control it. And that is the largest nuclear facility in Europe. And I'm very, very worried that an attack there could melt the core of the reactor, create nuclear radiation throughout parts of Ukraine, and that part of Ukraine's already been flooded by the catastrophe at the dam a week ago. So, and some of that could float over to NATO. And the NATO summit, as you pointed out, Jonathan, is in just 2 weeks. And this is going to be topic 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Well, I was about to ask you, can Ukraine take advantage of Russia's instability right now?
Well, yes. I think Ukraine just has to stay on message, the message being they're attacking us and we're fighting back. Ukraine is still strong on the ground. I understand there may be a shortage of ammunition, but Russia has a lot of air assets that it still could use, and Ukraine could use, and has been very vocal about it, more air assets and more air defense systems. So I don't assume Russia is not paying attention to Ukraine. I think that if Putin wants to show strength in a very dicey time for him, this is what he does. He moves against Ukraine. One other factor, without the Wagner group on the team, and it's not clear whether they're going to be on Putin's team or they're going to be quiet for a while, but without them on the team, Putin has lost a lot of his fighting capacity. They were the fierce fighters. They were the trained fighters. They were complaining that they didn't have enough ammo and other munitions, which may be true. But Putin's troops are pretty lame and pathetic.
All right, I'm going to pick up on something you said a moment ago. It ain't over till it's over. So, multiple questions. One, Prigozhin, part of the deal was that he exiles himself to Belarus. Do you believe that he will actually follow through on that and stay there?
I have no idea. And it just doesn't add up to me. I'm not a military strategist, but I do watch people, and I did serve 100 years in Congress and got exposed to what politicians and people in the media, and he's certainly one of those, the latter, do. This could be a head fake in some way. It just doesn't make sense for him to pick up his cookies and walk home, or not even walk home, walk out of Russia to an adjacent and friendly country. But hey, I don't know what this is. There's speculation that he got Putin to agree to shake up his entire top defense leadership. Maybe that's happened. Maybe he'll be back to replace Shoigu. I have absolutely no idea, although I think Putin is now properly mistrustful of him. But there's some side deal that we don't know. The other thing I'd like to mention is in one of his videos that I think got out pretty widely in Russia, he claimed that the reason Putin invaded Ukraine, which he said he was against, was to create more spoils for his top generals. If that is even vaguely true, or at least vaguely believed, that should be hugely unsettling to the Russian public, and obviously make Ukraine even more determined to push Putin back.
And the second part of my "it ain't over till it's over" question for you, Congresswoman, is also part of the deal is that not only amnesty for some of the Wagner mercenaries, but also integration of the Wagner group into the Russian military. Do you believe that will actually happen?
Well, I can't imagine, if the top guard in the military remains in charge, that integration works. They were just working for the other guy who was criticizing the top guard in the Russian military. And we've had total exposure to their lack of competence and the corruption that prevented them from using funds that were supposedly for modernization for that purpose, and said they were used for yachts. And I don't see any yachts winning war in the Russian war, Russian illegal war in Ukraine.
You said those outside Russia should not be talking about regime change. That's not actually the question I want to ask you is, how concerned should we be of a possible Putin regime collapse if the Russian elite abandon him, as all indicators might look like?
Well, let's first commend the Biden administration, or at least I do, for restraint. They are not talking about even regime collapse. They are talking about concern for Ukraine and making sure that Ukraine continues to win, or at least advance toward winning in this struggle against Russia. So that's a good thing. On regime collapse, possibly, I worry that what comes next could be worse. I mean, do we really want the Wagner Group in charge of Russia? Is that promoting any form of government that would be good for the Russian people, let alone for Russia as a very powerful 11 time zone Ukraine security member partner of the rest of the world? I think it would be bad. And there's no indication that Navalny and other people wrongfully imprisoned have any opportunity right now to advance their causes. And by the way, I'm worried that Russia's imprisonment of several people, including the Wall Street Journal reporter, is still illegal. And it is unclear to me what opportunities they're going to have. Hopefully I know we're working on this to get out of there. But it's dicey. And, I'll repeat Yogi, give Yogi credit. It really ain't over till it's over.